seats so that we can go live online for those that couldn't come tonight. Hi, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Lynette Nye-Schmidt. I'm the Public Information Officer here at South Fork Fire Rescue. Thank you all for coming tonight. We're going to get started with Ben's presentation. This is Ben Webster. He's an engine boss on our wildland crew, and he has served as our Fire Resource Officer here at South Fork Fire Rescue. We will be online on Facebook and YouTube also, so we will take questions both here and from Facebook and YouTube after his presentation.
How's everybody doing this evening? There you go. Got a military guy in the house. Again, my name is Ben Webster. I am an engine boss. I was the Fire Resource Officer. Now currently working for Parks and Wildlife, but I still do wildland stuff for the department.
It's not on
and thought we'd put together another wildfire awareness meeting. First one went really well. We did it about 2 years ago. Had a lot of traction. Want to keep that momentum and want to see people, actively, cleaning up their properties and being ready for a wildfire in case we get one. So let's go ahead and get started. So in Colorado, if you live in the wildland urban interface, it's not a matter of if a wildfire will impact your home and property, but when. Homeowners have the ultimate responsibility to proactively prepare their property for wildfire. By creating and maintaining the home ignition zone, residents can improve the likelihood of their home surviving wildfire and reduce the negative impacts of wildfires it can have on their property. So who was here for the Millions fire or the West Fork fire? So raise a hand. Okay. So a lot of you. As you guys know, we've had 2 major fire events in the last 25 years. We're due for another one, unfortunately. I say that, not jokingly, but seriously. We've got a summer lining up. It could be very active for fire across the state, including our area. As many of you know that live here, we didn't get the snow that we typically get. Our fuel moistures, stuff like that, are really low. When you have low fuel moisture, drier weather, lower relative humidity, and higher temps, it's going to be ingredients for fire. Who here has done any sort of fire mitigation or work on their property? So, okay, 3 or few of you. Okay. Who lives in and around trees or close to the mountain? Sorry, I'm not trying to bust you out. So I think this conversation is relevant for all of us. The thing about fire mitigation, the more of us collectively we do it, the safer our community is. If we have islands of protection and fire mitigation, obviously doesn't work as well if we all work as a community together and mitigate as many properties as we can. The less fuel we have, the less opportunity to have a fire and for that fire to continue to spread and move throughout the community. So this conversation, I think, for everybody in here, and I appreciate you guys coming in this evening and checking it out. And those of you that are following us online, thank you guys for watching us online, and hope that you guys get a lot out of this too. Anyway, we're going to go through the PowerPoints, kind of talk about home ignition zones, what the home ignition zones are, and relative to the distance from the house. Colorado State Forest Service, this is their material. We kind of pirated it a little bit. Adam, wherever you're at, right there in front. I think he's okay with it. He looked at it and gave me a semi thumbs up. So it's pirated information, but they do a great job and make it very simple and easy for folks to understand. So if your home is located in or near the natural vegetation of Colorado grasslands, shrublands, foothills, or mountains, wildland urban interface, which we in fire call the WUI. So everybody in this room, if you live in South Fork, you live in the wildland urban interface. and are inherently at risk from a wildfire. These include any areas where structures or other human developments meet or intermingle with wildland vegetation fuels. Um, so we look at obviously trees as being a fuel when we look at wildfire. But when that fuel comes in contact with your home is considered a fuel. So that's where the rubber meets the road. You guys are probably familiar with the fire we had. Is it the Marshall Fire? I think is what it's called in Boulder. Okay. So started out as a grass fire, but we had a major wind event, carried that heat into the homes, and then all the homes obviously became the fuel, and that was a catastrophic event. So our homes, unfortunately, are part of the fuel when we have that when the fire comes in contact with us. So our responsibility, ultimately, it's your responsibility to protect your property investments from wildfire. We're going to talk about that tonight. It's not as intimidating as you might think. Obviously, if you have a lot of property and a lot of big trees, it can be a lot more work, but there's some very simple things that we can do as homeowners. I mean, obviously, it's going to require a little work. It's very doable. And we've got people in the community with, as resources, including us, to help you with that. We can talk about that after the meeting. Ongoing maintenance, taking wildfire risk reduction steps is not a one-time effort. It requires ongoing maintenance. Some actions may need to be performed several times a year. Others may only need annual attention. So initially, when you come out and you mitigate your property for fire, you're going to remove some of your bigger fields, your bigger trees and stuff like that. Obviously, they're going to be gone. But grass, shrubs, things of that nature, leaves, especially pine needles, in and around your house, your gutters, stuff like that. We'll talk about in a minute. Those things are every year and sometimes twice a year or more. So when we do the initial work, it's important that we do follow up every year and come back and do some more maintenance to maintain the work that we started initially. Community effort to become fire adapted. Actions must be taken before, during, and after fire. Every community member has a role in fire adaptation, from civic leaders to homeowners. So we'll look at some different ways fire can impact our homes where we can have ignition. Ember ignition. Embers are small pieces of burning material that can be transported by wind of more than a mile ahead of a wildfire's flaming front. This is the most common source of home ignition during wildfires. Probably the most overlooked thing is ember ignition. Those of you that remember the West Fork fire we had, it's been a long time ago now, 13 years ago. Okay. You guys remember that big, huge plume, okay? Well, that superheated air was carrying that stuff in the atmosphere, and then our transport winds and stuff were moving that hot embers. If you guys remember, there was hot ash, pine needles, sometimes pine cones landing on us, some of us several miles away from that fire front. So the thing with embers, and we call it ember wash. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different slang terms we use in wildland. With those hot embers, obviously, we'll talk about this maybe a little bit later, but obviously they can land in a pile of pine needles on a roof, and that's all it takes. You get the ignition of those pine needles, they transfer heat to the roof line, and it's off to the races. So even something as small as an ember, if we have another fire, and let's say it's up the canyon, which obviously there's a good chance of that because of all the beetle kill, we can still have that ember, those ember showers, that ember wash impact us here. So it's important that we don't despise those small things, those little things like that, because those are the ones that can bite us in the butt. Direct flame contact, that's pretty common sense. If fuels are adjacent to a home, direct flame contact can ignite the house. Ensuring no such fuels exist within 5 feet of a home greatly minimizes this possibility. Obviously, for fires, we get impacted by fire. Direct flame contact's a pretty obvious ignition source. Radiant heat. You know what radiant heat is? You understand what radiant heat is? So you can have radiant heat from the fire and be quite a ways from it, and that fire creates so much heat it will cause spontaneous ignition of your home. Radiant heat's a no joke. It definitely can be a problem. Radiant heat is what you feel in your hands while you're warming them next to a campfire. This same type of heat transfer can ignite a home sources like ground fires or adjacent burning structures. Defensible space. So defensible space is the area around a home or structure that has been modified to reduce fire hazard by creating space between potential fuel sources. In this area, natural and man-made fuels are treated, removed, or reduced to slow the spread of wildfire and other fire behavior. Um, who has a fireplace or a wood-burning stove? Okay. Who stacks their firewood on their porch? So I'm not picking on you. So I won't. I don't want to confess to that. I'll lose my audience here. But what? Obviously, we do that a lot because of convenience, right? But that, guys, that's a huge fuel source, right? Leaving those fuels on our porch, I mean, can be a problem. And yeah, we burn fires in the winter, but a lot of times, we have second homes, or if you're like me and don't want to mess with moving the wood back to the wood pile, it stays on my porch all summer long. So there's some common sense stuff, like firewood on the porch that obviously we need to deal with. Um, so obviously we'll reduce ignition risk. Establishing defensible space reduces the likelihood of a home igniting by direct flame, contact, or radiant heat. Uh, Limits ember production. Proper defensible space helps limit local production of embers that can ignite your home. Prevents fire spread. It reduces the chance of a structure fire will spread to neighboring homes or surrounding vegetation. And then last but not least right here, create safe zones, provide safer areas for firefighters to work if they are able to defend your home. So I kind of got some people excited last time we had this meeting. Let me give you a little bit of fire background here. When I go out on a wildland fire, and let's say the person that's in charge of me, which they're called a task force, will send us to the community to prep that community for a possible fire coming that way, or the fire turning that way and going towards the community. They'll tell me, hey, as an engine boss, they'll say, Ben, I need you to go up this neighborhood and I need you to look at the homes. And we classify them in three different things. They're standalone, which thing looks bomb-proof, great. Don't need to mess with it. Prep and defend, and correct me if I'm wrong in this, and then not defendable. Okay. So as a firefighter, and I'm not trying to scare you guys, if we don't do the work, and I drive by your house, if a fire's coming, and I look at your home, and vegetation is not removed, and I safely do my job, I have to write it off and walk away. And we don't like to do that, but obviously for life safety and stuff, we can engage on those properties. So I said that last time and got some people excited, but that's how it works, guys. It really works like that. And that sounds kind of cold-blooded because it's your home, it's your life and everything. But at the end of the day, I want to go home to my family. As you guys would imagine, we can't put ourselves at risk. So, that's another reason why we do that. So as firefighters, we can get in there safely. And if we have time to do some work, we can do some work and give it our very best to provide the protection you guys need to save your homes. You guys are helping us do that by going ahead, and preparing your home and the entrance and the exit from your home, that driveway. We call it ingress and egress. Okay, if you guys look at the back, you can see all those apparatuses. They're big, huge vehicles. They don't maneuver very well. And if you've got a bunch of trees and limbs and stuff that growing over your driveway that you can drive your family's car through, fine. We may not be able to get a fire truck in there, or more importantly, an ambulance. Obviously, we're an EMS house as well. And with that being said, getting access to your homes, in case you have a medical emergency, which a lot of us have already had, that's important too. So not just looking at your home, but looking at the entryway and exits to your home. That way we can get in there safely. We can get our equipment in there. If we get our equipment in there, we can do a lot more work quickly, more efficiently. Take a quick pause. And any questions so far? Any comments? Yes. Yeah, so when your soffit line, you've got your oops, sorry, I'm staying. Okay. So the question was, we're talking about vents along your attic and along your soffits. You guys, a lot of you guys probably have those vents. They're obviously open holes to vent the attic space and stuff. Um, the question was, what do we do with those? Well, they should have a fairly small screen, and we use screens obviously to, yes, allow the air to flow up through there, but not allow embers to get up in there and cause a fire. Did that answer your question? So that's one of, obviously, that's a great point. Thanks for bringing that up. And that's something you should think about. If you've got vents and they're very open, you might consider taking some screen and putting that screen, behind those vents so you don't, there is embers and ember shower. They won't get up in that attic space and cause a fire. Yes, Joel. Yes. Okay. Sure. Sure. There's ignition zones, and yeah, matter of fact, we're going to get to that, Joel. We'll talk about that, and we'll get to that in just a second. Anybody else? Okay. Moving on. Computer ate it. That's all right. We can ad lib it. So while we're working on the slide here, you guys see this picture down in the lower left-hand corner pretty good? What are some common themes? I mean, you guys are not obviously firefighters, but you're smart folks. What are some common things that you're seeing with that picture, in that before picture? Huh? Lots of them, right? What else? What's that? Yeah, dead limbs, hanging dead limbs, stuff like that. Okay. This is Mr. Adam Moore. He might help me out a little bit.
Adam Moore with the Colorado State Forest Service. So this is it's always great to see somebody else presenting on some of the materials that we produce. So this was, like Ben said, there's copies in the back. Has a lot of great information. So the question on screens, if we go to page 7 under best practices, it references it as 1/8 inch size screens or less. So the reasoning behind that is you get the vents airflow like Ben talked about. And you also, with that small, the number does go through. It doesn't have enough energy to be able to start something on fire by getting that through. So the other thing with that picture he showed, it's like I said, it was taken from in here. But did anybody see a house in that picture that you had shown? There is a house hidden back there. So that's an indication, like Ben talked about with the firefighters going and being able to access and safely go around the house. Well, if there's enough vegetation where they can't even see the house, then there's certainly too much vegetation around there, and the fire certainly has a higher chance of getting much closer to the house. So even if you didn't understand some of the nuanced details of the defensive space, fire tools, couldn't see the house problem. We can even just start with the basics of, is there something there?
Well, it's a hard thing. I mean, I don't know about you guys, living in the mountains, I like trees, and I like trees on my property. But it's kind of a catch-22 because those trees be the caveat. They could be the problem. It could be the I hate to say it, the damnation. I hate to use the word damnation, but that could be the downfall of our property or our home if they're too close to the home and they're going to hold heat, ignite, and catch your house on fire. So that's kind of a tough thing. I've done some. I won't get off chasing rabbits, but I've done some home inspections and suggested taking a tree out, and I get a lot of pushback. We want to throw it out there, though. Just something to think about. Factors that determine wildfire behavior of fuels. The only factor we can control, right? Removing those fuels, taking those out of there. That's something we have control of and we can do something about proactively. Weather, obviously we have no control over the weather, right? Wind, temperature, humidity, it is what it is, and it comes as it comes. Topography, slope, aspect, elevation. Okay, anybody live on a slope in here on the side of a mountain? I do. That's a huge thing when we're talking about fire, and I won't get too deep a detail on that, but as you can see, those are those major aspects of fire, and the one that we have some control over, or a lot of control over, is the fuel side of things, reducing those fuels. There we go. Hardening your home against wildfire. Structure ignitability is a likelihood the materials in and on your home will ignite during a wildfire. The practice of reducing structural ignitability is commonly called home hardening. The ideal time to address home ignition risk is during design, but existing homes can be modified to improve survival chances. Many of you, I'm sure you've already built your home or bought a pre-existing home. I bought a pre-existing home. I made some pretty significant upgrades on my home, and I didn't do it just for fire. I mean, like stucco, things like that. But if you're looking at building a home or doing some serious renovations or remodeling, there's definitely some things you ought to take into consideration for fire. They can be pricey and expensive, but on the other hand, they can protect your home. Roofs and gutters. Ensure the roof has a Class A fire rating. Remove all leaves, needles, and debris from roofs and gutters. Choose fire-resistant roofing materials when replacing. Metal roofs obviously are going to be your best. Vents and windows. Screen attic roof, eaves, and foundation vents with, as Adam mentioned a few moments ago, an 1/8-inch metal mesh. Use tempered glass for windows, 2 or more panes recommended. More expensive, but using fiberglass window frames versus your vinyl. Chief taught me that. I'm looking at him, and he's vinyl, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, starts to melt at what, 200 degrees?
Not very heat resistant. If you have old vinyl windows, you might even notice they've already got a sag in it, and that's from years of sitting in the sun over all the years. But just a pretty mild amount of heat exposure, and it could be radiant heat exposure from quite a distance away, can start to soften that vinyl. If you ever pick up a windows aren't light, the glass is heavy. When that frame is a little soft, it's not uncommon to see vinyl windows fall out of the structure. I have been full.
So, yeah, great point. I'm not telling you all to run down to your local hardware store and replace your vinyl windows tomorrow. But if you're looking at doing windows, replacing windows, fiberglass is an option. I think they make aluminum frame windows, and those are obviously some alternatives if you're looking at that. Decks and fences. Many of us have decks and fences on and around our property. Screen or wall-in silt foundations and decks with 8-inch metal mesh. Create 6 inches of vertical clearance between the ground and the home and siding. And then also replace combustible fencing or gates at least within 5 feet of your home. That's kind of a little picture illustration showing some of that. So now we're going to get to the good stuff, the ignition zones. So when you're looking at defensible space and fire hardening your property, it's broken into 3 different zones. Your first zone is that right up from your house out to 5 feet. We call that zone 1. Obviously nearest the home, this zone requires the most diligent work to reduce or eliminate ember ignition and direct flame contact. As you guys can see on the illustration, this right here. Part of that, who uses gravel planting beds around their homes? Okay, that's ideal for fire. A lot of folks, including myself, have plantings, shrubs and stuff like that. That's a tough one because we like those, right? But they are a fuel. But we can reduce the risk of those by adding gravel beds. That way, when the fire travels up to the gravel, it's not going to ladder into the shrubs and then up into the windows and up into the house. And then being smart about what type of shrubs. There are more fire hardy shrubs that you can actually use that don't tend to hold fire as well and heat as well. I don't have any of those right off the top of my head, but there are some of those. So when you're going and looking at doing some landscaping, particularly in that first 2 or 3 feet around your house, might do a little research and kind of see what there is available for different types of vegetation and shrubs that don't carry heat as much. Some are, and probably the ones we use the most often around here, like potentias, are not the best. They carry heat really well. It can be very bad and guilty as charged. I have potentias close to my house. So doing.
So I don't forget, because, well, I'm not any younger. Our agency actually just came out with a new brochure last summer that is specifically focused on fire wires, so low flammability vegetation you can use for your landscaping. So for those who got to bring any this evening, but you can go online and you can find it and get some ideas for inspiration on that nice stuff to talk about.
So it's at 0 to 5 feet. And as it said, that's where we need to be the most vigilant, at cleaning things up. And at the very least, taking a rake and raking the old leaves and the pine needles and moving that stuff away from the house, 5 feet's not that much. It's, within a couple hours, usually you can have all that stuff pulled away from the house. And obviously every year should be looking at that part of the house, because that's one of the most vulnerable parts of your house, guys, is that first 5 feet. So being really proactive, at managing that space is important. Zone 2, the area transitioning away from the home where fuel should be reduced. This zone is designed to minimize the fire's intensity and ability to spread. So it's this area here, okay? It's out to from that 5 to 30 foot range. This is where we do a lot more intense fuel removal, saw work, stuff like that, where we're going to go on and we're taking out trees, shrubs. And when I say taking them out, I don't mean turning your yard into a desert. That's not what I'm talking about. It's and we can talk about this later in more detail. It's leaving some vegetation, obviously for aesthetics and for your property, but removing a lot of it and thinning it way down. That way, it's not going to carry fire into that area and reduce the chances of ignition. Zone 3 is at 30 to 100 feet. The area farthest from the home. Efforts here should focus on ways to keep fire on the ground and get crown fires to move to the ground where they would be less intense. You guys understand what a crown fire is? Everybody know what that means? So what a crown fire is when the fire is up in the treetops. It's moving across the tree canopy. Obviously, very, very dangerous situation, because that fire is moving from tree to tree to tree and can move at great speeds and carry a lot of heat. As a firefighter, one of our methods, and it's basically elementary firefighting, is we want to drive that fire down to the ground where the flame height and the fuel is low, and then we can come in there with water and cool it down, tools and stuff like that, and fight it. So basically, as a homeowner, that's the same idea. And this is this range out here. It's coming in here, and if this is full of trees, it's thinning those trees way down. So if we do have a wildfire that's encroaching our property, it's coming on our property, it's going to hit that buffer. It's going to go down to the ground, and it's probably going to burn. It's going to hunk around and start eating some grass and maybe some pine needles. But at that point, it's reducing the risk. And as it gets closer to these zones, closer and closer, that fire is going to have a lot less steam and a lot less probability to impact your home. So this area, especially if you live really close to national forest or heavy fuel loads, where fire can, obviously fire can be a big problem anywhere, but where fire's a big risk, this area right here is important. And even beyond that, we don't have a forest zone, but who owns property like, let's say, for example, bigger than an acre? Okay, I have several acres, okay? Proactively, it's coming in and maybe not being quite, quite as, not coming in and cleaning maybe as much as this third zone, but coming in that second, third, fourth acre on the outskirts of your property and thinning some of that down too. Especially along roadways and stuff like that. Or yes, sir.
Types of trees are.
Yes.
Can you talk about,
Absolutely. Okay. Yes. So your coniferous trees, your pines are the worst. Okay. Particularly your juniper trees. Your juniper they're probably the worst for carrying heat and fire. I don't want to tell you to take them all out, but if you're going to discriminate against a tree around your home, I would go after the junipers first. Next in line of that, you look at your like your spruce trees and stuff like that. They obviously can carry a lot more threat. Pondos are actually fire hardy trees, and when they're cleaned up and stuff, they've got a thick bark and they tend to keep fire from crawling up them, as opposed to, let's say, for example, like a spruce or a juniper. You get in your deciduous trees such as your cottonwoods. Now, I've watched cottonwoods burn. I'm not going to tell you they don't, but cottonwoods have a little less. They're a little more fire hardy, and then aspen are fantastic. I mean, those of you who have aspen, they're great. Matter of fact, we use aspen groves in fighting fire. We'll funnel a fire and direct a fire into an aspen grove to control it and to knock it out and actually put the fire out. It'll hit the aspens. In most cases, it just hits the aspens, goes to the ground, and that's it. So yes, there is. I mean, just to kind of give you a quick spit, that's kind of the general idea of what trees are worse than others. And shrubs, anything, obviously shrubs are bad. Some of you might want to keep a few around. I would suggest you keep them here and there, but don't have big patches of shrubs and stuff. Shrubs carry a lot of heat and can move fire. So, any other questions? Yes.
Just wondered, like, the whole defensible space, the whole big zone is a lot of work to try and tackle in one fell swoop. I'm wondering if you have any recommendations for how folks might prioritize where they start doing.
Don't forget to repeat the question.
Okay. So the question is, looking at fire mitigation can be overwhelming. And for a property, where do we start? What's practical? How, where do we start? For lack of better words, the elephant. How do we start to eat this elephant one bite at a time? My suggestions start obviously at 0 to 5 feet. Okay. Most of the time, you don't have a lot of major backbreaking work. It's pretty common sense, pretty straightforward. As a homeowner, you can do some of that work. I would say start there. Depending on where you live and the types of fuels, the amount of fuels, once you get into some heavier fuels, and if you have property with big trees, at that point you want to look at other resources. Reach out to somebody that does tree work. If you got neighbors that are capable people, maybe reach out to your neighbor. As a community, and I'm getting ahead of myself. Maybe as a community, and have a little wildfire committee as a community, and pull your resources together, pull your information together. That way you can help each other. Some folks, are very physically capable to do it. But if you're mobility impaired or there's some things physically you can't do, at that point you're going to need help. And it's a lot more financially. It makes a lot more financial sense to incorporate friends and neighbors as to spending money. And spending money, sometimes you have to do that. So I don't know if that kind of answers your question, but it's an elephant, guys. And if I were you, I would focus, on my immediate home, and as I have time, continue to work that, your work further away from the home. It's a process. And if you have a big property or more than just a small area, it can take you a year or 2 or 3 or 5. But it's just getting in there and doing it and staying after it. So I kind of got ahead of myself. Sorry. It's giving us a step to step here. 0 to 5, remove all flammable vegetation. Regular debris removal, like I said, remove your leaves and pine needles every year. Overhead hazards, trees obviously that are leaning over the house, limb them up, get them away from your roof lines. And eliminate storage hazards. As we mentioned, firewood, right? Anything like that that can catch on fire and carry heat to your home. Five to 30, manage grasses and shrubs. Again, I mean, if you got a small chainsaw and a weed eater and a lawnmower, you can do a lot of damage with those. And obviously knock that stuff down and keep it cleaned up. Create tree spacing. Remove enough trees to create 10 feet of space between the crowns. Basically, that's the width of the tree where the branches are hanging out. You want 10 feet of space between branch to branch. That's all the way around that tree, all the way around that crown. Small groups of 2 or 3 trees may remain, but maintain 30 feet between groups to prevent fire from jumping between them. So you can leave groups of trees. You have to take, if you want to leave 2 or 3 trees together, that's fine. You want to manage your property and have a good-looking yard. You just need to create more space around those groups of trees and decide, which ones to keep and which ones to get rid of. Eliminate ladder fuels. Remove vegetation that can bring fire from the ground up into taller fuels. Your grasses, your shrubs, that kind of stuff. Prune tree branches to a height of 6 to 10 feet from the ground, or a third of the total height of the tree, which comes first. So your little trees, you just take that tree, divide it into 3, and if it's a tree this big, come in and just take that first 18 inches. Pretty simple. Understanding fuel types and arrangements. Fuel is any material that will burn, whether in a wildland or urban location when fuels are abundant and there's no space between them. The fire can quickly become uncontrollable and destructive. The closer together fuels are to your home, the bigger the threat is. That's pretty common sense. So some different types of fuels, crown fuels, which are obviously these guys here, these aerial fuels, as they sometimes call them. Ladder fuels, your understory, your brush, your grass, it's going to carry heat to the bottom of the tree, and then the tree is obviously catching fire. Logs and slash, which on your property, you may have some log piles where you've knocked some trees and stuff like that down, and maybe you left them out on the peripheral of your yard. I would get rid of those if you have those. Needles and leaves, obviously within that first 5 feet being the most important. And then grasses, if you guys are like me, I mow beyond I mow grass out probably within 75 yards of my house. For fire and obviously for aesthetics, right? So taking that lawnmower and maybe mowing a little bit further out past your initial yard. Is that it?
That's it.
Yes.
Can you talk about doing your own fire system? I live down the river. I thought about pump and sprayer.
Okay.
And how effective are they? Is it waste of time? What if,
Okay. So to repeat the question for our line folks is, can you proactively create your own fire system, do some things proactively to prepare for a fire? So yes, you can. Depends on, when you're talking about pumps, if you have a water source like a pond or a river, there are some things obviously you can do and buy. I would get with one of us with the fire department and tips on that. And Lynette, if I've given her enough time, she'll talk about some of that stuff, preparing like your immediate stuff at home. But yeah, there's some things you can proactively do. Yeah, I mean, there's stuff out there. I haven't used those things. I mean, most of the time that's at a contractor or firefighter level. Without, you have to probably get some specialized training and understanding how that works. Sprinkler systems, like, I mean, those of you that have yards have sprinklers, right? One of the best things you can do if a wildfire is encroaching and is coming, and let's say you do have to evacuate, is taking and setting your sprinkler, as many sprinklers as you can around your home and turning them on. That way it soaks down all the property, and even on your house. When you set up sprinkler systems on fires, you're spraying on the house. And when that fire comes, I mean, when it hits that water, it's going to slow things down, and it's going to bring the RH, the relative humidity, up around the immediate area around your house. That helps out a ton too. So to answer a question, generally, yes, we'd have to have some deeper conversations about what you have and make some suggestions for you. So, any other questions? Yes, Charlene. You can. Okay. Okay. So to repeat the question for folks following live. So when we go and do fire mitigation, obviously we can leave a pretty heavy footprint on our land, on the soils and the native grasses, and can cause damage. So yes, that obviously is a problem, Charlene. Anytime you use equipment, sometimes you have to use equipment. That's what would really tear things up. Using, rolling a chipper through the middle of, through the middle of the deal, or using a skid steer or something like that, or a masticator. Those are going to tear up the soil, and it's obviously going to cause an opportunity for weeds and invasive species of plants to get established. Obviously, it's just being smart and just using some common sense. If you do disturb the soil and you mess things up, there are some different native grasses, seeds that you can go and buy. Colorado Seed down in Monte Vista, they have a really good native species grass. I think Big R, maybe Co-op, has some native grasses. Rio Grande Commodities. You can go in there and buy those seeds and do a little recovery on that property, and help kind of bring things back to speed. But just being smart about where you drive, especially heavier equipment, vehicles, stuff like that. If you're driving your truck, right through the middle of something, and it's muddy and stuff, you're going to make some pretty nasty ruts and scars. So just being common sense stuff. Or we can hug.
That is one tiny microphone. Ben's correct on that. The other thing I would add is actually doing work in the winter when there's a few inches of snow on the ground. Does a really good job of insulating the ground. It's also frozen, so it doesn't get disturbed as much. And unless it's a really harsh winter, sometimes the workforce is looking for some work in the winter months as well that they can do outside and stay warm and get active and things as well. So I would consider not just this time of year, but the whole year as opportunities to reduce your wildfire risk.
That's good. That's very good. Yes, sir. Yes and no. I'm going to get to that here in just a second. So the question was asked, is a landfill in Monty the only place to go with limbs? What we're proposing to do, you want to jump in on this? I'll let Tyler here. Do you want mine or?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So one thing that we were gonna see if there was interest in today was having a community chipper day. We'd set up our big chipper down here next to the station, and then you'd be free to bring whatever woody materials you wanted, and we'll chip them and dispose of them. And then after the fact, if anybody's looking for chips, we're obviously going to have some chips to give away. So the first date that we were looking to start that is the 24th of this month. So I know the branches are a problem. There's not a lot of places that will take them because the dumps don't like them. They don't pack well. They also don't, they take up a lot of space in your truck beds and or your dump trailers, and so it's not very economical to be moving those kinds of branches around. So we thought that if we did it here local, people could just bring them and we'll dispose of them. So our chipper will do 19 inches. I think what we'd really prefer to do, though, if you're going to move that kind of material, that's the kind of material that I would chop up in firewood and dispose of in a different way. So I would say, whatever branches you can physically pick up and throw in the back of your truck or your trailer, those are the kind that we're looking to really get rid of. That larger material, I think there's some other creative ways to get rid of it via firewood. So.
Can you bring in willows?
Yep. Yeah, willows will work. Yeah, just about anything. So as long as it doesn't have other foreign materials, rocks and metal or whatever. Just bring them here, and then we're gonna have a crew here, and then we'll help you get them unloaded and feed them through the machine, and then how many ever loads you need to do. We're planning on just being available all day that day. So, like we were proposing 9 to 5 that day on the 24th. So, and then if it goes real well, we might set up an additional day after that as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, just to expand on that, I mean, this is a great opportunity the South Fork is offering, and the fact that you don't have to load the chipper, because I've run chipper programs in other counties and other places, and I've been using a chipper since I was in high school, so they never scared me. And it wasn't until I started asking people, like, do you want a chipper for a grant? Do you want a dumpster you can load? Do you want people to help you do it? And apparently people were scared of chippers. So the fact that you can just drop it off and the fire department does it it's ease of getting rid of it, and there's not really a safety concern with it. So I would definitely give them their money's worth if they want to do this more than once.
And if you've not seen the new chipper, it'll eat your car. And you. I'm kind of scared of the new chipper. I might be dumping and not touching it. So, any more questions?
So Ben, around here we've got log homes with whatever kind of, we've got metal buildings, we've got
Sure.
stucco.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, I mean, intuitively, log homes gonna ignite faster than a metal building with a metal.
Okay.
But so where's stucco from there? Stucco semi-resistant, or is that stuff like paint?
Okay. So to repeat your question for our live folks, so there's different building materials that homes consist of: log, stucco, metal, and to further on that question is, how good is stucco? Stucco is fantastic. Okay, it's a masonry product. So being not quite concrete, but like concrete is very, very good. And if you have the opportunity to stuck your house or you have stucco, that's fantastic. Logs, surprisingly, are next. Well, in addition to metal, metal obviously is great, fantastic. Metal's probably number one. But a big, heavy log, a log home actually has quite a bit of fire resistance. It takes quite a bit of heat, surprisingly. Case in point, great analogy. Yep. Any other questions? Yes. Yes. So the question was asked, can we walk through evacuation process? I'm going to hand that off to Lynette, and she's going to answer that question above and beyond. Unless there's any further questions, I'll step aside and allow her to take the mic.
Might fall into the same category. So we've had created fire breaks.
Sure.
So we talk about your evacuation to be based on areas, regions, fire breaks, that kind of stuff.
Okay, so I'll repeat that question. So based on our prior 2 fires that we had and potentially creating fire breaks, how does that affect our evacuation in the process? So that's a tough question to ask because the fire itself, the dynamics, the situation are all going to dictate how we do that and how the evacuation is done. So that's kind of a tough question to ask. Fire's dynamic. It does things in obviously areas that have those in place that sit close to those burn scars. Yes, are going to have probably a little better chance of having a little more defendable space. Is those fuels, or many of the fuels, not all of them, of course, we've had growth since then, have been reduced, but that's going to depend on the situation of the fire itself.
So your evacuation zones are really going to depend on a lot of factors, where the fire is, the weather that day, how the fire behavior is. And so the incident commander and the emergency management team is going to take all of that into account, along with things about what neighborhoods, what does the egress look like. There's so many factors that go into that. We don't have set established evacuation zones here like some of the big cities do. The best thing to do is on your resource list that we handed out, there's a QR code, the second one down, to register for the Everbridge alerts. These are going to be the alerts that the 911 center sends out. You can register, make sure your landline is on there. It should be, but you can check and make sure, and you can also register your cell phone. You can set it up to get both phone calls and text messages. And as it allows, we will also do our very best to put these out on Facebook as well, but it really depends on whether we're able to. In those first initial responses, your best bet is going to be to rely on the Everbridge alerts. So that is the first thing that you want to do. And then we have some resources on here to make sure that you have your evacuation kit ready. There's another one here, and all these are on our website too. So you get ready to make sure that you're prepared. Your 6 Ps are your biggest thing. Make sure that you have plans for your people and your family, your pets. Have things, your papers gathered or know where they are. So things like your insurance plans, all of your vehicle information, all your vital documents, things like that. Make sure that you have them where they're in a spot that are easy to gather when you need to evacuate. Hopefully you have notice, but you won't always. As people in Boulder and California have learned, sometimes there's not notice. So, and make sure that you have things like your medications, prescriptions that you can't easily get. Have those things gathered up as well. You want to make sure that you have plans for your pets. Rough Dogs does have an opportunity to take some pets in that case when that can happen. But it is always best to try to have your own just in case they make capacity and can't take any additional. If you have horses or things like that, the emergency management always tries to set up places to take them. But if you can have your own plans, it's always a good idea of where you can take them that's away from the mountains. Do you guys have any other questions about that?
Hey, Brian,
Yes.
can I introduce you right quick? This is Brian Burrell. He's our emergency manager for the county. And you want to, this is your house. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. And I need to get between the flags here. But thank you. My name is Brian Burrell. I'm the Emergency Management Director for Rio Grande County. I'm also the manager of the airport. You may have seen me address the county as that. You may wonder how I get those 2 jobs, and I blame Gene Glover. It's his fault. We'll just say. So really a lot about what Lynette was saying is when we do make a determination to evacuate, that's going to come from a decision from the fire chief and the professionals here dealing with the fire, and when they call the county and they need our assistance, that's when we would jump in to help with some resources. But for evacuation, the county just entered into an agreement with a company called TextMyGov, which allows for the county to send out emergency alerts and things like that. We also have the ability to send out the integrated public awareness alerts, which will ping your cell phone, your radios, the TVs, internet. It'll hit all the different outlets without you having to opt in or opt out. So if it's bad enough to where we're saying, hey, we got to evacuate this part of South Fork, or if we have to evacuate all of it, then those messages are going to come out, whether you've opted into the system or not. But the alerts that Lynette was talking about with the SLV 911, and then you can also go on the county's website and sign up for those text alerts on the county's website. And also on the county's website, there's an emergency management section under the departments, and there's a lot of this type of information that's on there as well, and the information from the states and links to the state's websites for WUI codes, the defensible space, and the different areas. So there's a lot of information online through the county's website. But my job here is to support these guys, and when it gets beyond their ability to handle, or if they need some assistance, call the county, and the county will step in and do what we can to help. So, you guys have any questions? All right, thank you.
Sorry to pick on you there.
Oh no, that's fine. I appreciate it.
A couple comments on so the decision-making process. How do we arrive at an evacuation decision? So it's not always about, we do have the burn scars, and that is definitely a factor. But it's not always necessarily about that, when the fire front is moving. Sometimes, like Ben was saying, one of the major risk factors is those ember showers. So we might be looking at the way that the weather pattern is falling out, and the evacuation, even if you're right next to the burn scar, still might affect you just because of the way that those weather patterns are falling out. The other thing to consider that we have to take into account is the smoke itself. Sometimes the smoke can be as big a problem as the fire due to health concerns, people on oxygen, allergies, asthma, all those kinds of things need to be considered as well. Because we can start to have incidents within an incident where we're trying to deal with the fire, and now we're starting to get people with powers out, and so people's concentrators aren't working, or they're having trouble breathing, and so then public services dealing with those medical emergencies on top of the ongoing fire. So there's a lot of things that go into that decision making, and a lot of it comes back to utilizing the resources to their best ability. And if we're stretching ourselves thin doing those other things, like taking care of people who can't breathe due to the smoke, that might trigger that decision. We need to just remove people from that situation so that we're not having that complication.
Good points.
Question about evacuation. To that point, is there there was a summer where there was a fire at Vita and one over at Durango? Do you guys also direct how far to go and which route to take to get there? I mean, I'm assuming it's like a hurricane where they tell you where to go.
Yeah.
I don't know that positively, so I'm just asking you guys how big plans are, which direction you need to head, and how.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's going to come in where we utilize the emergency managers because they work really hard at pre-planning those kinds of things. So let's say you were in an RV park, right? We have a lot of RV parks, and so honestly, the best thing there is to just tell people go home. But if you can't,
You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
yeah. But if you can't, they work hard at partnerships with other facilities outside of this region that we could take RVs down to like Sky High Park, park people down there, or horses, the same thing. Prearranging locations to move animals and equipment or RVs or whatever it may be. So there'll be a lot of guidance coming from the EMs on that.
And we would certainly work with the CDOT and with the fire department and the fire professionals to find out, where the fire is going and what the best routes for evacuation are, and then where to go. because right now there's not any set and designated, evacuation shelters. Now we have several different options, but there's not one that says, well, we're going to go here, because it depends on where the fire is, depends on where the emergency is coming from, depends on, if we send everybody to a shelter that's in the path of the fire, well, that's not a really good idea. And then everybody has to move in. So, yeah, we would work with the CSP, with local law enforcement, and because that's really the evacuation routes and things that comes down to CDOT and law enforcement helping us direct folks and move them where they need to go. And so but the main thing is when the evacuation order is given, is your house worth your life? Is your car worth your life? The gentleman was talking about having a fire suppression, which is a fantastic idea, but that only goes so far. Please don't stay there and try to fight your house when your life's in danger. When the evacuation order is given, let's go. Let's get out. And if you're an RV, absolutely go. Long out. Yeah. Is there any other questions for me as the emergency management director for the county? Yes, ma'am.
How we get information about what's going on. I know last time there were like hospitals or what for the property owners that have to go to work every day. When can we actually expect on how to get information?
Sure. Typically, when things like that happen, if we activate our emergency operations center, or if the emergency management team with Southport, that type of information is going to come out from the PIO, from the public information officer. It'll be online. It'll be via text, and it'll be on the websites. It'll probably go out via radio. Lots of different information outlets to get that information to you. But from more often than not, when those types of big events are happening, there'll be a set time and day for a briefing from the Emergency Operations Center every day. And then obviously, if you're in a shelter, we're going to send that information to the folks that are operating the shelter, whether that be the county or be Red Cross or the state level folks. So that information is going to come, the correct and accurate information will come from our PIOs, obviously online and through our various social media outlets. There's going to be a lot of rumors. And so when we do have events like this, the main thing to do is to make sure you get your information from a credible and a reliable source, because you certainly don't want to go where everybody's Facebook says to go if that place happens to be in the path of fire. Make sure your information is accurate and is coming from a credible source.
Yeah. So the question was, if there's the opportunity, would there be a meeting before the evacuation? And yes, if we have a major type of event like the West Fork, hopefully we have the time to do those kinds of things and plan for it. Yeah. Decks, Trex versus wood. So is there a preference between the two? Honestly, the biggest risk with decks, like you were saying, it's hard to just get a large piece of wood to just light on fire. So when I look at a house, or when Ben looks at a house, a deck is a concern, doesn't matter what it's made out of. What I'm really looking for is the maintenance of the deck and stuff under it. That's what I'm way more worried about. Materials that can produce enough heat to light that deck on fire, because both will burn. They burn differently, but neither is really going to light on fire spontaneously by itself. It's going to need some other source of ignition. So if we're keeping the decks clear of firewood and mainly underneath, that's the spot that I think most people get in trouble. It's hard to get under there. Weeds grow, and that fire will go right up under there, and that deck's attached to your house. The other thing we kind of glazed over was fences too. I've seen a number of houses get taken down by something as simple as a wood fence. The wood fence is a vertical piece of firewood. It's easy to get going, and it gets going out there in the middle of the yard and then burns along up to the side of the house, lights your house on fire. So having that gap, if you're evacuating, that is one thing. or will do during prep is open gates. Like if you've got a wood gate, we'll open that to create a gap so that we don't get that continuous fuel.
So we have a lot of practice. Really do because people who just aren't here and they've got dead trees, on grass, all of that. What do you do?
So the question was, we've got a lot of houses that are not full-time residents, and so these houses might not be being taken care of as well as we'd like them to. At the end of the day, it is private property. So from a fire department standpoint, there's nothing we can really do to force anybody to do this. That's why we have meetings like this to try to educate and get people to get motivated to do it. I would encourage you to talk to your neighbors, share this information with them, and try to come together at it from that community standpoint. But yeah, that's at the end of the day, though, that's like Ben was saying, those first ignition zones are where it's really important. If you're taking care of that around your house, even if it doesn't end up being a community-wide effort, which is the best, it all helps. So
I would expand on that and say, well, grab spares of these and leave them on their doorsteps. But really, be a good example so they can see what your property looks like, what a nice wildfire safe property is, and so that they can be like, oh, well, that does look pretty nice. I would like to do that with my property. There's another tool out there that we work with communities on. It's called Firewise Communities. And so it's a recognition program for communities that are making a positive effort to work together to reduce their wildfire risk. Here in South Fork, Bear Creek is a member. So if your community became a Firewise community, it's another education tool and motivation tool you can use to say, hey, we're this Firewise community. All you have to do is put forth 1 hour of work a year to help us meet our qualifications. So how about this year? Can you maybe remove the pine needles from your deck? Can you maybe rake some of the pine needles away from the edge of the house? But it's an educational and motivational program for residents. So if you're interested in that, you can talk to me and we can do some follow up on that.
unfortunately, too, some people are getting a lot of motivation from their insurance companies too. Um, I deal with that quite routinely. People having their insurance drop them for these reasons. So, an insurance company does a drive-by on a structure like that, and they're probably going to be either canceling the policy or making a phone call. So,
Adam, are there still grants? I mean, we talked about this a little bit earlier. Are there still grants available for communities, neighborhood communities that would get together to be able to grants from the Forestry Service to do some of this work? Is there still available or no?
So we do have a grant program for communities to reduce the wildfire risk. Individual homeowners can't apply. It typically comes out about September, maybe August-ish, and it's usually due about the end of October, beginning of November. So once it becomes available, if you've signed up here, we'll make sure Tyler knows, so we can make sure the word gets out to all the communities about that opportunity. Here in South Fork, Bear Creek has currently a grant they're working on with us, and Alamo Park just finished up a grant, and we've got a few other communities that have applied, but unfortunately weren't successful. So the word's slowly getting around, but yes, we have that as an opportunity. Thanks for the reminder, Brian.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
My understanding is that there's a statewide moving code sometime this year. My understanding is that the jurisdiction of enforcing that code will fall on local fire departments. Just wondering about if there are plans for how more to be doing.
yeah. So the question was, there's been rumor of a statewide WUI code that's coming down the pipeline. That is true. Right now, really what's happening is the state is using their resources to do the legwork to get that kind of code written. There isn't So if you go look at the general fire code, the fire code only pertains to the structure itself. It doesn't talk about the surrounding stuff. So that is coming, but right now the main effort that's going into it is just to get it written, and start to figure out how to establish that. So I don't anticipate that there will be any significant regulations coming anytime real soon. I don't think the state is anticipating that either. I think they're just trying to create those guidelines to help people like this to know what to do. So eventually it probably will, and it will be like many other codes. Very rarely are codes retroactive. They're usually just forward. So it would be more pertaining to new construction, stuff like that. So.
To kind of add to that, I sat on that subcommittee at the state level. And at that point, we elected a committee to actually deal with that. And that's been what, 2 years ago? When was I? About 2 years ago. So that's in lieu right now. It's quite a process, as Tyler said, and that was because of the Marshall fire. It really stimulated the governor and the governor's office to put the wheel rolling on that. And as Tyler said, I mean, is there teeth in it? Eventually, but I mean, it's not going to cause us too much headache. Hopefully, we can do that as individuals proactively and not be told to. That's my hope.
And most of the code is this kind of stuff. Yeah. It's just writing it down.
As you can see, we have a bunch of partners up here trying to work to reduce your wildfire risk. As Ben talked about at the beginning, it's the community effort that it takes. So us as the State Forest Service, our office is in Alamosa. We serve all 6 counties here. We work jointly with South Fork Fire Department. I think you should be proud of the fact that they have a full-time fire department. They're proactively taking these efforts. They have the chipper program they're developing as well. But like I said, we're a tool as well. So if you have an annual HOA meeting and you would like one of us to come talk, reach out to either of us. We can figure out whose schedule it fits on. We can do workshops with you, wandering around, talking about what defensible space looks like, talking about like what types of trees or lighter fuels you might want to remove. We can do this in person. We can do stuff remotely if you need. But, jointly working together to help the communities reduce their wildfire risk. So we don't just produce pretty brochures, but we're out there on the grounds working with people as well.
Yeah, and you know, if you have questions, we're more than willing to come out and walk your site and take a look and make some recommendations. Same thing with Adam. I'm definitely happy to do that, to come do that.
And then the different stages of fire you may encounter this.
Okay, so the question is fuel moisture content, kind of some terminology there. If you sometimes you might hear that in the news or various media outlets. So to just kind of break it down, one of the most common ones that you'll hear terms like 1,000-hour fuels or 100-hour fuels. What that means is, so if you see a moisture content, say 21%, 1,000-hour fuels, what that is that 1,000-hour fuel is 21% moisture content. 1,000-hour fuel is a fuel that takes 1,000 hours to adjust to the humidity in the environment. So if you have very dry conditions and you're coming out of winter, got big logs that are 1,000-hour fuel, and we've got nice humid winter days and we start into summer, that log is going to take 1,000 hours before it adjusts to the summertime low humidity levels, where a 1-hour fuel literally is changing all day long. So 1,000-hour fuels, those are big logs. 1-hour fuels, fine grass. So sometimes you'll see that terminology. One of the big things that we watch for all the time and is a trigger for red flag warnings or burn bans or anything like that is relative humidity. That is a huge piece of what's going on because that humidity is moving the fuel moisture content. And then obviously wind. Wind is another huge, but wind kind of comes and goes. The trends of humidity is what we really watch. for those kind of predicted fire behavior. Yeah, and then burn ban types. So really just a few levels of burn bans. So the most severe burn ban would be no burning whatsoever. So no slash piles, no campfires, no burning of any kind, unless it's something that you can reach over and shut off. So that would be like um, a propane stove or a propane fireplace on your deck or something like that. Those are typically still allowed during a burn ban because they can simply just be shut off. And those style of devices don't throw embers. So um, that also can those burn bans can extend into the forest and the machinery that's used in the forest. So needing smoke arresters on chainsaws um, is typically part of the burn ban as well. Then there's kind of a modified level where it's a burn ban, but really what we're banning is large slash pile kind of burn. So you can still maybe have your campfire in an approved fire ring in the Forest Service or even at your house, but we don't want to see any like open burning slash piles or ditches or fields or stuff like that. The burn bans, the way those work too, typically what we like to do is coordinate at the county level, and just to make it easy on the general public so that you're not trying to figure out what's going on depending on your geographic location. So typically if we do a burn ban, it's county-wide, and the three fire chiefs in the county kind of coordinate with the sheriff and the emergency managers and make a plan for when we're going to implement the burn bans for the county. Um, those typically follow suit or follow close with whatever the Forest Service is doing as well. That way everything just kind of matches.
Ben and Tyler know I can talk about wildfire and forests and trees for hours, but I'm going to leave you with one last thing. Since you're here, I'm going to make an assumption that some of you are Colorado residents, and so you might have noticed when you did your taxes about 2 weeks ago, there was a wildfire mitigation measure tax subtraction. I don't do taxes, but what it does is it allows you to, if you have expenses towards reducing your wildfire risk, so $5,000 worth of expenses, you write off $2,500 of it. So it doesn't take into account you spending time doing it. But if you paid somebody to do it and you have a receipt, you can turn that in. Basically, anything that's in here as a recommendation, they will let you do. I had a resident that bought gravel. They put at 5 feet around their house to create that 5-foot fire-free zone. They wrote that off. So look that up. I'll make sure that gets to the fire department so they can put it on their website. But it's just another tool to make it a little bit cheaper for reducing your wildfire risk.
As we're a small community, and you guys are the faces of, it brought to us the last fire, how the individuals, how can we support you, what you guys do during the fire? What are things that we can do that make your job easier if you guys are going from the home?
So the question was, if we have a major event, what can the public do for the fire department or law enforcement or whatever responders to make our lives a little easier? Stay informed would be the big thing. I think if we run into problems, it's usually with the uninformed public, doing things that they shouldn't be doing or being in places they should be, and we're having to deal with that. So staying informed, follow the directions, try to comply with those things. Sometimes, people want to do their own thing and they go around roadblocks or they're, sneaking in after hours and things like that. It just makes our lives more difficult. So definitely, helping out with that. Beyond that, when the incident is kind of in its growth stage, uh, that's typically when we need the most help logistically, food and stuff like that. Later on, if the fire gets really big, like the West Fork complex, if you were here during that, you saw what those campaign fires look like. resources that those kind of fires bring to bear when we get a type 1 team in here to help manage that are incredible. So once we get to that kind of stage, logistically, we're doing pretty good. So it's usually in those initial stages where if you want to help out, that's the time. So,
Our Facebook page, that's the emergency.
anything else? So spread the word. Chipper Day on the 24th. Be here. We'll be just right out here in the old clinic parking lot. And 24th. It's a Saturday. Yeah, we were thinking a Saturday might be the best, just because everybody should be doing yard work, and so.
One last thing, if you didn't sign in, please do so on the sign-in sheet in the back or scan the QR code on your handout and sign in for us. And if you opt in, we will send you an email when we have events like that and things coming up. So try not to rely on social media so much. We're trying to get some of those emails and other alternatives to contact you. So thank you all for coming tonight. Do you have any other questions? Okay,
Oh, one final thought.
go ahead, Ben.
I guess one of the intents tonight and is to create conversations, guys. To obviously raise awareness, create smaller conversations within your home and with your community. Begin to be a catalyst of change, and begin to build this momentum. There are resources, as people acknowledge. We can help you fill in those details, but begin to have these conversations and begin to create that culture change, because it's going to take a culture change to help keep this community safe. If you guys could be the catalyst of change in that and be the leaders in that in the community, man, that's going to help us do our jobs. Because you guys are as much a part of this as we are. And if you guys, as an informed public and residents of South Fork, we're going to help all of our visitors come, because we know there's only a handful of us in this room. By a month from now, 2 months from now, there's going to be thousands of people in our national forest, in our community. And they're going to be looking to us, but also they're looking to you as informed individuals and public to help them and to help them navigate if we have a situation. So kind of put a little bit of this back on you guys, but definitely you got resources, here to help you. I've got a business card on the very back of the table. I am a resource with the fire department, and in addition to myself, I'm offering some different stuff to help folks. So please reach out to me, to Tyler, Adam, anybody that stood up here, and we'll obviously be there to help you guys. So any other questions, anything else? Thank you guys for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.